Hello and good evening, and welcome to a story a day for 26 days under the 2.6 challenge for the Stroke Association. If you can and would like to support both the stories and this amazing charity, you can do so at www.justgiving.com/fundraising/Sandra-Regan1. Either way, I hope you enjoy the stories. So with thanks to Amy Douglas for this particular story, there was a young man called Davy, and he worked with a fisherman. He didn't really like fish. He hated them, in fact. He hated the way they smelt. He hated the way that they slipped between his fingers, the whole kind of scaliness and sliminess of them. Really didn't like it. But as many people, he needed to earn money, and this was the job he had. So he did it with as good a grace as he could, kept smiling, chatting away with his employer. And one day he was working on the boat alongside his boss. His job was to gut and scale, and generally fairly unpleasant duties like this. And in the pile of fish that his boss was giving to him was the most beautiful fish he had ever seen. Oh, how it sparkled and shone. There was ruby and sapphire and emerald in its skin. It was almost as if it were a rainbow in the shape of a fish. It was too beautiful. He couldn't bring himself to chop off its head and do all the other business that he was there to do. So he threw it back into the water and hoped his boss hadn't seen. Unfortunately for Davy, his boss had seen, and he sacked him on the spot. "Go on, get out of here, throwing away perfectly good fish." Well, Davy kicked up his heels on the way home, scuffing at the pebbles on the road, generally trying to figure out what he was going to do now that he had lost his income. And as he was walking, he realised that someone was walking beside him, someone who hadn't been there before. He thought this was a bit odd. And he looked again, trying to work out who this character was, and there was something to do with the shiny little horns on top of his head and the sharp, pointed little bit of his tail sticking out from underneath his coat that told him this was none other than the devil himself. This is just what I need, he thought. And as if he could read his thoughts, which perhaps he actually could, the devil said, "Hello, Davy. I hear you've been having a bit of trouble lately, mate." And Davy thought, well, he's right. So he said, "It's true. Not having the best of days, if I'm honest." And the devil said, "I'll make you a little deal, me old mucker. Tell you what, I will lend you the finest, most gorgeous cow that will produce the best milk that you have ever tasted. And I'll be back in 3 years. And then you can either keep her or lose her. And really, that's up to you, because I will have 3 questions for you. And if you can answer my questions correctly, you can keep the cow. What do you say, Davy, me love?" Well, thought Davy, 3 years. What am I going to do anyway? Probably going to go to hell at the end of life anyway, so might as well just say yes and hope for the best, really. So that's what he did. And just like that, the devil was gone, and in his place was this most gorgeous cow with the biggest brown eyes and the longest eyelashes. I mean, what's that about? How do cows get such gorgeous eyelashes? Anyway, she went home with Davy. And the next day he went to milk her, and oh, the devil had been right. This was the creamiest, richest, yellowest milk that you could ever imagine. And no matter how many of his family he gave milk to, they just couldn't seem to use it all. So being quite an entrepreneurial bunch, they decided to make a little business from the cow, as you would. So they made butter and they made cream and they sold it, and they just made so much money that they could expand their business. And they went into, well, goodness me, what didn't they go into in terms of food production, following which they opened a restaurant. And this turned into one of the best restaurants in the area, serving the most amazing meals. And of course, this was all taking time, and sort of 2.5 years after he'd got the cow, Davy realised that soon the devil was going to be back, and the devil was going to be asking him questions, and he wasn't sure he was going to be able to answer them. Were they going to be difficult questions or easy questions? Were they going to be technical questions? Were they going to be intellectual questions? He figured he ought to do something to get himself ready. So, got out his smart new iPhone, profits from the restaurant, you see. A lot of Googling going on in his spare time. But time passed, and the amount of knowledge out there in Google land is pretty phenomenal. And there was no way he was going to be prepared. So it came to the day, 3 years to the day, he was in his restaurant, waiting for that one last customer in the corner to finish his dinner and leave, having paid. When suddenly, just like that, in a flash, of course, it's the best way when you're the devil appeared. And oh, he had polished his horns to such a shine, and he had put on his smartest coat, and he had preened his tail, and he was waving his trident about. Good old-fashioned sort of devil, this one. In the air, full of excitement. "Hello, Davy, me old mucker," he says. "I'm here. Are you ready for your 3 questions?" At which point Davy is stuttering and sort of shrinking into the corner and hoping that the earth might swallow him up, and then kind of thinking, well, that wouldn't be such a good idea because that leads down to where it leads down to. And the customer in the corner of the restaurant stands up, walks over and says, "Yes, he is. And that's your first question. Done." Well, the devil looked at this stranger and started blustering. "Are you going to tell him to shut up and butt out of it?" he says to Davy. And the stranger says, "No, he's not. And that is your second question." And then he got to the end a bit too quick. Well, the devil now, he was really quite riled. "And who do you think you are anyway?" he said to the stranger. And the stranger said, "That was your third question, and I am the king of fish, and Davy saved my life 3 years ago to the day." At which point the devil was so frustrated that he just disappeared in a puff of smoke, and he forgot to take his cow with him. Davy was so grateful. He hugged the king of fish, and they said their goodbyes. And that restaurant is still there to this day, serving some of the finest food And I tell you, if you can ever find it, do get a dessert made with that most delicious cream from that cow. So thank you again for listening, and we'll see you tomorrow. Have a good evening.